Hi, I'm Tim. Join me in this video as we unbox, assemble, and test fly the FMS Viper 15th anniversary model of the electric ducted fan jet. Let's get to it. This is a completed model of the Viper. It's an impressive kit. I built this over 2 days, just making sure I understood the instructions. If I were to build a second one, I could put this together in 30 minutes. There are 5 steps to put the thing together. It's that quick. 43-inch wingspan, 40 inches long, flight weight of about 4 pounds. It uses a 6-cell battery, 70mm 12-blade electric ducted fan inside. And as I mentioned before, it is a 15th anniversary edition of it. They've made a lot of improvements. One of the improvements they made, apparently the original gear was very springy on the original Viper, and it was just tough to land. You can see the CNC manufactured gear is just gorgeous gear. And even on the nose gear, notice how they have the kneeling spring built into the nose gear. Just that type of attention to detail. It's also listed as a trainer or transition jet for somebody who's never flown a jet, electric ducted fan aircraft. That would be me. I've never flown an electric ducted fan. This is going to be my first time doing a jet, and so it should be interesting. Let's start the journey together with an unboxing and see how we put this together. As a favor, if you can like and subscribe to this video, it really helps the channel a lot. I appreciate any actions you take in that direction. If you'd like to purchase one of these from FMS, check the description of the video. There's a discount code you can use at checkout that'll save you some money on the airplane. I just received from FMS this 70mm Viper V2 ready to fly plug and play model, and I'm really looking forward to this. This is my first jet. I've never flown a jet. It's an electric ducted fan, but join me as we go through this. If you've never flown a jet, you'll be in my shoes. The one thing I wanted to point out on the box is a huge box. We're going to unpack it here just in a moment. Very well packing. But the 70mm, that's about 2.7 inches. That refers to the size of the engine. It's a 12-blade electric engine. And the other thing I like about this, it's just a model. It's not a scale of any model. But the V2, this is the second version. The original Viper came out 15 years ago. The landing gear wasn't that good. You've got to have a good landing gear for jets because they land pretty fast. And if the gear is springing or not right, it's not going to turn out well. They have an incredibly improved landing gear that we'll go through as we unbox it. But the thing I like about the V2 is the second version is anytime you do a second version of any model, and I do this all the time with my own designs, even kits, the first model is built, there'll be weak points, things you could have done better, you fly it, understand those changes. The second version is always fun to build because you know what to improve on it. It just comes out better. So I think this is what they did with this one. It should be a very interesting project. So I'm going to stand up for the initial unboxing. This is the box right here, and you can see it's a very well thought out presentation of everything in here. So I'm just going to go through step by step, take out the parts. All right, so the two side things are in. Here is the wing, and the EPO foam construction is absolutely rock solid. You can see they have the flaps and ailerons built in. There are servos for each. This is a retractable gear. We'll have to connect that. Looks like 4 screws to bolt on the wing. Nothing too complicated on that, but that is a look at the wing, and all the connectors are listed for aileron, gear, and so forth. So we'll unpack that and take a look at it. This is the stab. Again, unique. I've not seen this in a while, are 2 separate servos for each of the elevator halves of the Y connector. So we'll go ahead and eventually hook that up. This is the rudder. Notice there is a servo built into the rudder that goes right to the rudder. with a connection right here, and that should be pretty easy to do. Nice job with the paint scheme and all that. And note, everything is hinged, and the hinges are obviously sealed. There's no gap in that for the airflow. That's a good thing for any model and the connection points. This is the cockpit. It's a rather nice cockpit with a pilot, empty back seat. The all-important assembly instructions. I'll study this on the next segment of the video for how we're going to put the model together. And this is all that's needed to put it together. These are the various connectors for the control horns and the screws. I mean, this is all that's going to happen to put the model together. So that's the fuselage right here. Again, a very nice fuselage. And this is the nose gear. Once we get that down, we'll show you the CNC manufacturing for this very strong nose gear, and a separate servo for steering the nose gears, characteristic of the nose gear models here. Plenty of room for the 6-cell battery. And if you look up at the tail, you can see the electric motor, the fan blades in there. Just the air intake, just a pretty clean setup for this model. We just unboxed the plane. I just wanted to take a moment to go through some of the connections, because this plane is going to go together so quick. It's going to go together in 15 minutes, just about. So one thing I wanted to point out for this very nice kit of the Viper, there are 3 things that you're going to have to provide on your own for this plug-and-play model that is not supplied by the kit. You're going to have at least a 6-channel receiver. You're going to have at least a 6-channel transmitter, the 6-channel for the flaps and the gear. And you're also going to have to provide the battery. It's a 6-cell battery. It's very clear online, or when you buy it, which battery you have to get to provide enough power for it to go. And so I just wanted to point that out. Now, you could use any receiver you want. I am a fan of Spectrum. This is the AR620, small lightweight receiver. What I like about it especially is you can see it's got a built-in antenna, so you're not worried about the orientation or having to have a wire come out for the antenna. I think that's very important. But what I want to point out is the model goes together. This is the stab. You can see the 4 holes here where everything is screwed in. So literally, you just put it in place after you connect the wire, screw it in, and you're done. So I want to show you the wire connections before they get covered up by the installed control surfaces. So it's very well labeled throughout the model. These are the 2 elevator servos. I'll have to connect the control arms here. They just snap on and it goes through here with a Z-bend. That's not hard to do. FMS servos, but notice they're listed elevator and elevator. There's 2 because there's 2 servos. So what happens in the airplane, you'll see there are 2 elevator connectors that I connect these 2 right like this. That's what you do. And then there is 1 rudder that will connect with the rudder connection on the vertical fin and the rudder with the servo in here. That's all you do for the back. You screw it in place and everything's fine. Now it gets a little bit busier up here in the fuselage, so let me walk you through this. These are obviously the connectors for the electronic speed control. These are the connectors. I'm going to be using the XT60 connectors. I'll have to put that on. That's just a separate thing. Notice this is the extension for the rudder, but there's also a second rudder line here that connects together in a Y connection, and this goes into the servo and the rudder input. The reason there are 2 rudders are you have the rudder servo in back. This rudder is a steerable nose gear that steers the airplane with the rudder control on the airplane. This plugs into the servo. This is the throttle, or the ESC, that goes into the number 1 port. And then this is the gear, which on my AR620, the gear goes into the number 5 port. This is the gear. Now, the final thing, and it just is worth a minute to look at, here's the underside, or the top of the wing. The fuselage goes in place right here. Notice that there are 2 flap servos, a flap servo here and a flap servo here. Those 2 servos are connected with a Y connector. This flap is what plugs into the receiver, in my case in port number 6. The gear is a little bit busy because there are 3 gear. So what will happen is, you see these 2 gear right here are for the 2 mains in the wing. What will happen is, with this gear, there is also another connector here. This one is the gear located here for the nose gear to get plugged in. All 3 of these gears, wing, nose gear, when plugged in, this single one that says gear plugs into the servo in spot number 5. So that's how the gears are connected up. Then finally, the ailerons are very simple. There are 2 ailerons. You can see the 2 ailerons here and here. It's a standard 2 ailerons, and this is the one connector into the receiver. So it's a little bit of busyness initially, but if you think through it, it all makes sense. There's no reflex autopilot controller. You just plug them right into the servo, and then you're set to go. So we're going to screw on the horizontal tail, screw on the vertical tail, screw on the wing, make sure everything is connected beforehand, and that's basically it. I'll say it now, but I'll say it twice and a third time. We've got to make sure the center of gravity is met. The directions are very clear on where the center of gravity is going to be. That will be affected by you depending on what battery you get, the weight, and shifted it back and forth. And I'll go over that for real once I get my battery in. I ordered it the other day. It should be here shortly. These are the 4 parts of the airplane, literally, that you screw together to make the completed model. One thing that was a change, there was an addendum sheet on the connecting rods between the servos and the control surfaces. The directions show them all connected. The handout just shows that you're going to have to connect those separately. They're not part of the instructions, as you can see here on the stab. They just fit in very well. Now I went ahead and put in the connecting rods for the horizontal stabilizer. I think the best thing to do, you'll see this in the video, is wait until you have hooked everything up electronically so you know the exact center point of the servos. That'll make sure your control surfaces are more accurately centered. And I did that with the rest of the model. The directions are quite clear. Here's the wing. There's just 4 screws. All the screws are the same size for the wing and tail surfaces. You don't have to mix and match. Notice for the horizontal stabilizer, there's 4 screws, very clear indicated that you have to connect the servo leads to the connectors. Same for the vertical fin, just 3 screws. The wing's a little bit more involved. This is the wing. You can see kind of a rat's nest of wires. Just sort through what they are. I'll go through that in the video. And then they go through that small rectangular hole. I actually enlarged that a little bit with an X-Acto knife. This is the underside of the fuselage. You can see the screws with the Allen wrench to screw those in place. Just nothing to it, just 4 screws, holes on the wing, that's it. This is the horizontal tail surfaces in place, and you can see with the Allen screw in, the servos are already installed. You just have to literally screw it in place. Same holds true for the vertical fin. There are 3 screws that hold that in with the single servo for the rudder. And you just literally screw it in after you connect the servo to the extension. Good time now to get your receiver and plug that in. All the wires are quite accurately labeled. I discuss it in the video. Just see where they are. Here is my XT60 connector for the battery, and all the wires for the receiver just clearly marked. It's really nothing special. And here is the wires connected to the servo. You'll need a minimum of 6-channel receiver. And I just found on my DX6 Spectrum transmitter there is a menu for the receiver port assignments. You may have the same on yours. So everything's connected. What we're going to do is just check the aileron servos to make sure they're centered before we connect them with the connecting rods. Here is the flap servo, just to make sure I know where that is before the connecting rod. You can see how it will connect to the flap. And a check of the landing gear. Everything seems to work fine.
The other thing I want to point out, just for the continual discussion of the quality of the model,
All of the hinging to the control surfaces is continuous. There's no gaps at all. That's very important for high-speed aircraft. Also, with the linkages that are supplied, it is absolutely tight. There's no slop whatsoever. You don't want slop at any time with your models. You can get away with it with a Piper Cub, perhaps. With these jets, you can't. It's just an excellent connection from the servo to all the control surfaces. So let's take a look at the elevators first. Up, down, and that's about a ½ inch. The rudder goes left and right. Notice the nose gear goes left and right as well, so that matches up. We'll take a look at the ailerons, left and right, the correct amount, and we will look at the flaps. Here is up, half flaps for takeoff, full flaps for landing. And the final thing we'll look at is the landing gear. Let me just put it on the tail so you can see this. And I've got it on switch number A here, and we'll retract the gear and go ahead and extend it. Now the final thing is we'll do the motor. So I'm just going to be careful. I'm going to point it to the back here. But again, I'll just give a little bit of throttle. You'll see how powerful the motor is. And that's with a 3-cell battery. With a 6-cell, it should be plenty of power. And that is the model. We are done. I just have to get the 6-cell battery, put that in the correct place. The center of gravity is marked clearly on the plans. It's about where the forward latch is. Make sure that balances out. We can move the battery forward and aft. A final control check, and then we're all set to head out to the field for test flights. When we have a good day with the weather, we can do that. Okay, so I'm going to hold it, and then we'll take a look at the throttle. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put this right here so there's no accidents. Plenty of power, I think. The Viper fits very well in the trunk of your average car. We're here at the field for the test flight of the Viper. As I mentioned, this will be my first jet aircraft RC flight experience. So everything looks to be okay. We'll go ahead. The weather's good. Wind's down the runway about 3 or 4 knots. We'll go ahead and put in the battery and try to take her up for a test flight. Wish me luck. One other thing I want to point out, as I mentioned about 1,000,000 times, this is my first jet flight. I'm a little bit nervous. Is what I'm going to do is planning for the transition of the first jet flight. I have half flaps, which are takeoff flaps, and obviously I have the gear down now. My plan is to not retract the gear or the flaps for this initial flight. Just one less thing I have to worry about looking down the transmitter. Also, I found with these fast models, I found out with the P39, keeping the gear down helps a lot with orientation. It just is one more clue for orientation as this thing zips around. So that's the plan for the first flight. So this is the no kidding maiden flight. We apply a little bit of power, track straight down, full throttle. It just takes right off with a 6-cell battery. Immediate turn on of traffic to keep sight. I throttle back a little bit just to see how it handles, and it's flying fine. This first flight, as I mentioned, I kept the gear and flaps right where they were. And I slowed down a little bit just to keep it in sight more than anything else, see how it handles. It handles fine. A few times I got a little bit slow, added power, immediately picked back up. It is a heavier model, the ducted fan. You've got to stay ahead of the thrust. You can't just add power and save it at any time, but planning ahead, it should work out okay. And now we're going to line up on final. Again, you get a plan for a stabilized approach. I wasn't quite wide enough on this, so I'm coming in at an angled approach, but the approach angle is okay. I'm angling towards the runway, and we're going to see how this works out. So airspeed's good, half flaps. I'll take a bounce in the infield, then on the runway, and full stop, pretty close to where we took off. Well, we completed the first flight. You saw the video, and I really couldn't be any happier. This is my first jet, but it absolutely flew great. You notice that it tracked right down the runway on takeoff. The nose gear steering was aligned fine. Very positive control, plenty of power with a 6-cell lipo. The plane took off, and you can see it accelerating as it took out. I throttled back fairly quickly for the initial turn on of traffic. I'll make no excuses. It was left turns the entire flight as I was feeling out the jet. A couple times I got a little bit slow, but the power came right back in to establish a safe flight. I did not have a stabilized approach my first one, had to knock that off, set it up again, and came in. This is a good flying airplane. I'm looking forward to many future flights with it as I learn how to handle these high-powered electric ducted fan turbines. But for a fun, impressive model, something a little bit different than what you already have, and for a first-time jet, I think this is an absolutely wonderful choice for your consideration. Good luck if you get your own Viper.